Hi, my loyal listeners. So this could be one of the best shows so far. I have two very experienced Marines that are in the mental health business of U.S. veterans today. I don't know if I should call it business, but they help veterans recover from a lot of the trauma they have experienced. The one is Garret Biss, who a retired Marine Corps pilot. Oh, and you retired in 2015, Garret, right?
That's right. Yes.
Oh, okay. So, rather than there were things that happened afterwards that we'll get into, but the also the other guest is a special guest because it's my daughter, Jennifer Breyer, and she was a U.S. Marine veteran who served 10 years and worked with veterans in the addiction field for over 20 years. And currently, I help the wellness coach for veterans. So we really have some pros here. So let's delve into our topic, okay? Garret, I'll start with you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the challenges common among many veterans, but that you personally experienced after retirement?
Sure thing. Let's get right into the challenges in the darkness. Why don't we?
Start and then we end with light.
All right. I like it. Yeah. So when I transitioned from the Marines in 2015, and unfortunately, my journey was not uncommon from what I've come to understand. A lot of veterans face when they transition out, and it took me a number of years to really be able to fully comprehend or put a finger or a name to the challenges or why I was why I was feeling with that struggle or why I was dealing with some of those challenges. And what I've come to understand is that the transition from military service itself can be traumatic. So we often think of veterans that struggle with PTS or with some challenges that they face, mental health challenges they faced, attributed to their service, and we might look for things that happened during their service that contributed to that. What I've come to realize is, for myself and for a lot of veterans I've spoken with, that it was the loss of some fundamental needs that we have that occurs when we transition from the active duty that was really the catalyst for a lot of the challenges that we face. And for myself, my own journey, when I transitioned out, I knew there was a void inside. I knew there was something missing. I knew there was some pain. I knew that I wasn't feeling the way that I wanted to feel in my life, but I couldn't really identify why. And that actually made me feel more helpless and more worthless because I couldn't attribute the pain that I was feeling to something that I could, to a source that I could attribute it to. I almost wish that there was some, in a strange way, I almost wish that there was some horrific thing that I'd experienced in the military so that I would know, I could go find a clinician and say, all right, this happened. I'm struggling now. What can we do about it? And
A
how do we
plus
move
B
forward?
equals C, but you didn't have
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't have the A. I was feeling the
Yeah.
pain. I was feeling
Yeah.
the B, and I was, couldn't figure out. So it took me quite a number of years and a lot of, kind of, self study and
Yeah.
reflection on the challenges. But what I've come to understand, and I've laid out in my TEDx talk, and we'll talk about the mission behind that. But that we have some fundamental human needs. Basically our needs for connection, our needs for positive self identity, and especially our need for meaning. And for many veterans, they lose those instantaneously. We're not prepared for it. And as a result, many veterans struggle in many different ways.
And Jennifer, how was it for you when you came out after 10 years?
Yeah, I think so in preparation for this, since you called me an over preparer, you sent me Garrett's TED Talk, and it was right on the nose. I just really, really appreciated it and what you talk about as far as the transition from military service out of military service was very traumatic in and of itself because of those lack of connection and purpose and meaning. And yeah, so I think that it was I often joke that particularly with Marines, it takes like 5 years just to realize you have any autonomy in your own brain. And I like, having worked with veterans, like I really think there's a 5-year mark thing that I'm saying it just took those 5 years just to realize that I can make a decision.
Just as a counter perspective, I'm in the middle of you two in my mind, and I'm thinking, I was not in the service. I did not experience what you guys did, but I had like trauma in my life from an early age, like 5. And for the first 40 years of my life, there's a lot of trauma and abuse and different things. And I turned to alcohol, not knowing that I was self-medicating anxiety and depression. And I wasn't talking to anybody. So I can relate when you're in that space of what the hell's going on with me and I don't know. So Jen, what led you to seek change though after you left the Marines? You knew you needed to change something in your life.
Yeah, I think out of necessity really was, yeah, just realizing that I was no longer thriving. And,
Sense of purpose, maybe.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Garret, like you also dabbled in alcohol, right? As a coping mechanism.
Dabble would be a nice euphemism. Sure.
I tried
I dabbled in it, swam in it, whatever.
Oh my, well, it's so easy. It's acceptable. That's what makes
It's socially promoted.
yes.
The work of Annie Grace, I read her book. One of the things I got from that, she's, she points out that alcohol is the only drug that we have to make an excuse to not use.
Oh my gosh, that is so on the money. It's readily accessible and it's looked on. I mean, all day long, anything I turn on, like The View, for instance, they're always talking about wine and like it's nothing.
It's grossly so ingrained in our culture. Like you go into a store, you see little knickknacks where it's I don't drink alone, I drink with my cat, or it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and there's just so much ingrained in our culture to normalize this use of a substance. And I'm not for or against the use of any substance. I'm against the use of a substance when it creates a negative consequence in your life. And there's a lot of people that maybe they start out and it's not creating a negative consequence, but it's becomes so over relied on that it ultimately does. And then people get stuck because of that journey into that dark place, because of the loss of self-esteem, the loss of self-worth, the loss of ability to just cope with the challenges of life. It all kind of comes together in this worst case scenario where you then rely on this one thing that's creating a negative consequence.
Absolutely. And I've been in AA for like 33 years, and I sponsored a lot of women, and a lot of the stories are pretty much the same. And alcohol started out to just calm them down, numb their feelings, and it worked. Until it didn't work. I was a very functional drinker, wasn't I, Jen? She can attest. But when I finally hit bottom and I had to look at the dark side, what were the demons inside of me for real? Because I obviously wasn't drinking socially fun, Jen, you have such a passion for life. My daughter is into so many different things. I think I talked to Garret and told him about your rowing, right? And your Grand Canyon adventures. I didn't tell him that you were helicoptered out the first time.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, a story.
Tell him what happened. You got dehydrated, I guess.
I actually got something called rhabdomyolysis at the bottom of the canyon, which is when your the proteins, your muscles start releasing proteins and kind of poisons you. And so and that first time I actually went with 2 fellow Marines, I think in search of some of that, again, that sense of purpose and connection. Like you talk about,
Black Hawk Down, I always think of like they had a kid do.
That was the Army. That was
the Army, but it still was a helicopter going down to get somebody. She always corrects me, my references to what service I'm talking about. Anyway, going on with this, Garret, but your approach to recovery differed from the traditional addiction treatment. Talk about that.
So in some of my darker places, when I was trying to figure out what was going on inside and where this void was coming from, I was recognizing some of the behaviors, as we talked about, some maladaptive coping mechanisms that I was over relying on. And I saw myself sliding. And instead of seeking traditional treatment for those issues, I was fortunately connected with a mentor who introduced me to, some applied positive psychology principles and some human potential training principles. And through that journey, I realized that I was getting to a place where I no longer wanted to numb. So when I look back, I realized that through that process, one of the first things that he helped me do was reconnect with myself. So reconnect with the value that I had, reconnect with some of the positive elements in me, recognize and reconnect with some of the strengths that I had, and then use that to pursue and to create a more meaning in life. And through that journey, I began to fill some of those voids and then recognize that, hey, I don't, now I don't need, I feel so much, so much of the cravings have dissipated and so much of the temptation has dissipated. And I don't even feel that constant need to numb the pain or escape the situation that I'm feeling. So
Right.
through that journey, and then later on, when I connected with some other friends who had gone through some more of a traditional treatment route or a support group route, I realized that there were some things that I picked up along the way that could be very beneficial and helpful and complement some of the things that they were introduced to.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is the thing, like we were talking about the mentoring. I call things like that talk therapy. You have to talk to someone else. You can't keep it all to yourself. And AA can only go so far. Like AA, you have a sponsor, you have a meeting, you're going to share certain things. But for me, that wasn't enough. Like I had to have intensive therapy, Jen knows, for 9 years. And because what happens a lot of times, if you still have all these things you haven't resolved, okay, this alcohol almost killed you, you turn to something else to numb yourself. So I had turned to food, and I went away again to an inpatient to deal with that. And they went a little deeper than an AA rehab. They went a little deeper into cause and effect and, knowing yourself. And then 5 years later, I was really depressed. And poor Jen, she lived through all this, she knows. And I went for a wonderful program at the Karen Foundation. 5 days, they only take 6 people for a week because it's that intense, to work on family of origin issues.
Wow.
Not surprising, right? Because we have a lot of stuff that goes way back. And then when we get to be adults, whether it's being in the service or bad abusive marriages or other combative situations, stirs it all up again. That's how I feel. But Jenny, you talk a lot, I'm sure, to your clients about authenticity and positive self-image. Am I correct on that? Is that something you tell them
Yeah,
to
I
focus on?
think I don't know that I'd say positive self-image, but I'd say like authenticity and a sense of purpose, similar to what Garret talks about. So because I think that the research does show if we particularly connect our health behaviors and choices to our sense of purpose and what's important to us in our life, that we're considerably it increases our health span and lifespan, and we're much more likely to be successful in maintaining those.
Yeah, yeah. You need that. You need to have a feeling that you belong in the world and you're not just here by accident. So Garret, like what aspects of self-worth and identity did you focus on in your own recovery? Like what things did you look at?
I think one of the things that was most profound and most helpful, and this is something I actually bring into a lot of the recovery coaching that I do, is a very simple exercise of sitting down and making a list of 100 wins and successes that you've had in your life. Now, typically when I offer that to somebody I'm working with, or if I introduce that concept or that idea, the normal response I get is like deer in the headlights. And they look at me and they're like, are you kidding? I'm only 35. I'm only 40 years old. I haven't had 100 wins and successes, which to me, that's a great litmus test to show how bad of a mental space they are in at the time. Because I don't care who you are, you've had many thousands of wins and success. There's been many thousands of times in your life where you've done the right thing, or you've succeeded, or you've made the right decision, or you followed through. And if we're not connected with that, because we've spent so much time ruminating over the mistakes that we made and over the things that we wish we'd have done differently,
That's right.
then it can be very limiting and very challenging to feel good enough about ourselves to make the right, next decision, or even have faith that we can follow through and do the right next step. So
Yeah.
that's a really valuable place and a fundamental place to start, is just connecting with the value that you do have, the wins and successes. I often say it's giving credit where credit is due. If you're going to sit here and beat yourself up and tell me about all the bad things that you've done, okay, that's, we got to recognize that, certainly. But if you can't also give yourself credit for the great things that you've done in your life, and the wins and successes, and the things that you've learned, and the accomplishments that you've had, well, we need to create that foundation too, because that's going to help fuel us in the work that we're doing moving forward.
Yeah, you need a balance sheet, you know. I've used that technique with my girls sometimes when they had a decision to make. And I would say, well, make a balance sheet, put what's negative and what's positive about it, whether it was a man or a job or whatever. And I used it with my sponsees also. And that is very powerful, because when they start writing it down on paper, like things then start popping up for them, they go, oh, yeah, that was a win. That's something positive. So
Yeah.
I really believe in that. Now, Jennifer, well, this will be for you, but I also experienced and I just talked a little bit about it. Human connection, purpose, and meaning. Many people wander around and think they're worthless, they have no value, they're not doing anything in the world, and they get depressed and they just sit there. Now, you know me, I'm proactive. I see something, I go find the solution, I do it. And that's me, thank God, because I was able to get out of my own addiction and raise 3 beautiful daughters and married to the same man for 35 years. So, thank God. But some people get stuck, I guess. And I always say to them too, that you find your purpose and meaning by the things that you do in your life. So like you were saying, so if you're a person that is walking by someone that needs help and you help them, that was meaningful. If you have a waitress and instead of just talking about what you want to eat, you make conversation and get to know them, they appreciate that. And you made a difference in their day. So you have purpose. You're giving other people that human contact. That's how I merge all those 3 things together. So, Jennifer, what do you think about that? That connection, purpose, meaning, and how to get there?
Yeah, I think how to get there, I think it's reflecting on one of the things that the first thing that I usually do when I work with clients is help them explore their mission, aspirations, their purpose. And I think as far as the military, and having served in the military and transitioning, I think that is one of the biggest things, the difficulties, which Garret, you spoke to in your TED Talk, is, there was such a sense of connection and purpose within the military, and now you get out and it's very different. Yeah. And it's harder, so much of sense, purpose, identity was sourced. I know for me, one of the things was not only the military identity, but then I realized so much of it was sourced in achievement, and I needed to be connected to my sense of being, which mindfulness played a huge part in.
Yeah. I get that whole thing about the sense you wanted to do something. I wrote a couple books after 2020 because, I'll just say it, the shit hit the fan 2020 with everybody, because it just changed everybody's life. Everybody, with the masks, or whether you decided you weren't going to leave the house for a year, which my husband and I did, because we have other illnesses and things. And I got depressed again and went back into therapy. And they told me, you know, when your husband stops talking, because he stops talking usually late in the day, you know, he's not really a conversationalist. It's like the Parkinson's has drained him. He's done enough for the day. And I'm a talker. And I comment all through the TV shows and he doesn't comment back. And I'm like talking to myself. So she said, 4 o'clock every day, go in and write something. I said, I'm not a writer. She said, just write anything that comes to mind. And out of that came my first book, my memoir, which is Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons. And the wolves were initially my family. And the demons were the men I used to get away from them. And then found out later that I had other demons inside of me. Okay. So I'm going to forget where I was going with this, Jen. You know how I get. So, oh, I know I am. So my therapist one day said, like reading, and she read the book, she said, you know, that's legacy. When people say they want to have a legacy, you just made one because you left something of yourself behind. And I hadn't thought of that, you know? So you guys, what do you think about legacy and wanting to do something important in your life? You have any thoughts on that either?
Yeah, I think certainly all humans have this desire to be connected to something that's greater than themselves. You know, we're meaning seeking creatures. So we want to seek meaning in things. And in some ways that's positive and that promotes us and helps us kind of move forward. Also, it can also be challenging because if we don't have a meaning, our mind can do horrible things to us and derive negative meanings or a negative explanation for something that we experience. And this is really fascinating in the discussion around post-traumatic stress disorder versus post-traumatic growth. So I understand, you know, that a trauma, so a very basic understanding of a trauma, I understand that a traumatic experience is one that creates a fundamental shift in your values, beliefs, or understandings. So you're living your life and then you experience an event and some value or belief that you had about the world or about yourself in the world is fundamentally changed. So for many times, and a lot of the focus and attention goes to how that creates stress disorder or how that creates a negative effect after that event. However, there's this whole other side of the equation, the post-traumatic growth. Just because you had a fundamental shift in your value, belief, or understanding doesn't mean it has to have a negative consequence. You can have some profound growth or some profound benefit that comes from it. And one of the differences that separates the two is whether or not you can associate a positive sense of meaning for that event. So if we have a horrific thing that happens and we gain a new strength or we gain a new awareness and it helps provide something positive, if we don't have that meaning, many times what I've found is that we'll associate a meaning to it that bad things happen to you and you can never know what to expect, or I deserved that, or I did something in the past and that's why I have to experience this dramatic experience. And that's if we can't find another meaning, that seems to be the one that we kind of come in and replace it with. And that leads a lot of people to a lot of the stress disorder, the challenges that they'll face after meaning. So yes, we certainly need a sense of meaning, and whether that's a meaning, you know, day to day through the things that we're doing. One of the things Viktor Frankl often said was that a meaning or sense of meaning also provides your capacity to endure hard and challenging times in life. So those times, you know, when we had that uniform on, we pretty much had an issued sense of meaning. Many individuals are called into the service because the kind of meaning that comes along with it. And when we lose that sense of meaning, we also lose our capacity to endure those hard and challenging times.
Yeah. My mind was stuck in the 50s because when Jennifer graduated from high school and she said to me and her father, I'm going to go into the military. And I went, okay, I can understand that. I said, what branch? And she said, the Marines. And I went, what was that? The Marines? Like you had to pick the toughest one. Remember that day, right, Jen? And that's what she decided to do. And it is part of making her the wonderful person she is today. And Jen, how do you help your veterans that you see and talk to them about this personal growth and overcoming it?
So particularly in the capacity I work now, as a health and wellness coach. You know, I start with helping them develop their mission, aspirations, and purpose, and recognizing that sense of purpose. And that would apply to, you know, if there's potentially having had a trauma, you know, reassigning meaning to it if it's not already there. And so I think it was, even though I'm working from a coaching perspective as opposed to a clinical perspective, which I have in the past, I think that that's the there's so much healing growth in that.
Do you find it's more effective than the clinical approach, having done both?
I wouldn't apply, you know,
It
which
just has
is
different-
more effective. I think they, to use a military term, they attack the mission from different angles.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds good. Garret had said to me before this, are you going to be familiar with our military terms, our Marine sayings? And I said, well, every time Jeopardy has a question about the Marines, I get the answer right. So I've known my daughter for a long time, so I think I've heard a few expressions. Anyway. Now, Garret, getting back to that mentoring, how did you find or get to know about mentoring? How did you find a mentor? How did that happen?
I don't know, somehow I think it was the right place, right time, divinely guided, seeking answers. So during my last deployment in 2013, I wasn't in a very good place in my life. I was a good place professionally, but not personally. I had just received an advancement or a credentialing in the military, which I'd been studying for many years for. And now, having received that, I had a lot of time to think about other stuff for a change. And being off on a deployment, yes, we work around the clock and it's very hard, but you also have a lot of downtime to think about things. And I did a lot of reading and reflection and a lot of soul searching. And I often say I was at a place in my life where, from the outside looking in, I was probably winning in every aspect. I mean, I had a great job, the career, the wife, the kid, the cars, the travel, like everything I thought I was supposed to want in life, and I was going to feel happy and fulfilled. But internally, I felt dead inside. And it really shook me awake to this experience, or this thought that if I'm pouring everything that I have and all the energy that I have into these things that I thought I was supposed to do, and these wickets I thought I was supposed to hit along the way, and yet I'm feeling, 10% return, maybe 10% the level of happiness and joy and fulfillment that I thought I would experience, then what's going on here? It's either one of two things. One, the world is supposed to be this miserable experience that we suffer through, and then we ultimately die at the end. Or there were some fundamental values, beliefs, and understandings about the world and my place in it that I was just getting completely wrong. So hoping it was the latter, I really kind of opened up my curiosity to go, read a multitude of different books, watch a bunch of TED Talks, watch a bunch of, Google Talks and different sermons, and just trying to find clues of anything that I could find to kind of piece together a better understanding. And through that, I did learn a lot. And through that, I did have a tremendous amount of growth. And I think that helped me really appreciate the value of seeking that mentorship, seeking that wisdom or that knowledge from other people that have either been down a similar path or might have some things to share with you. So I think that really opened me up to that possibility that, okay, maybe somebody's been in a similar situation before. Maybe they can share something with me that will help me in this place that I am. And that's kind of what started it and piqued my interest.
So how did you find your personal mentor, though? How did you get someone to mentor you?
So the mentor that I worked with most and really attribute a lot of the change of perspective and the sparking the growth in my life is a guy by the name of Jack Canfield. He was the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul and wrote New York Times bestseller, The Success Principles. My dad had introduced me to some of his stuff, like Course on CD or something that I took with me to Afghanistan in 2013. So when I came back, I started consuming some more of his stuff. And then as I retired, I was offered an opportunity to go to spend a week with him at a workshop out in Arizona. So my dad and I went along, and then I kind of continued to work with him and be trained by Jack in some of the work that he does as a human potential trainer, and spent a couple of years doing that, and then working for his organization a little bit as a coach and as a mentor myself.
That's fabulous. And that's
so funny. I don't mean to interrupt. That's so funny because I was obsessed with the chicken soup for the soul books when I was active duty. I would always get like a new one when I would, have to go on an exercise or something. So that's funny. But yeah, it's wonderful stuff with that. I wanted to go back to the question you asked me if that was okay about the differences with clinical and the coaching perspective and I remembered that like when one of the ways I view it is that a lot of the clinical work is crisis management. Just, people will come and they're drowning. And a lot of the clinical is targeted at just getting your head above water and then maybe getting, your treading water. I think that to get stability and functionality, but I think the coaching often approaches it from a perspective of like what Garret was saying, that human potential and thriving and flourishing, where the positive psychology and the human potential movement and those type of angles are more about experiencing happiness and flourishing in your life.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, well, I needed the clinical first, though. I needed the rehab.
Well, a
and
lot
the
of people do,
clinical,
and I think
and,
they can pair and partner and complement each other very, very well.
Yeah.
And I understand the difference between the two, and I've never been a clinician. I've certainly sat with a lot of clinicians, but I had another mentor of mine for a short period of time who said, as I was trying to find my way in this space and like, how can I make the biggest impact? And he said, Garret, there's a lot of tools and resources and professionals out there to help people get out of the gutter and up onto the curb, but there's not a lot of people to help people get from the curb up the mountain and really into their full potential.
Exactly. That's true.
Yeah, that's a wonderful metaphor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. So, let's talk about the military's approach to addiction and recovery, if you don't mind, because I heard that they don't really address it as much as they should. Do either of you have an opinion or an experience about that? If you don't, it's a,
Well, I can speak to it from a perspective of, because at my last 4 years while I was active duty, I was a counselor. I was a substance abuse counselor while an active duty Marine. And I think I went through the transition. I went through the period of being a clinician during 9/11 when the operations tempo increased drastically, the trauma increased drastically. And so when I reflect back, I saw a distinct difference where they did eventually start addressing it, more head on. I'm a little disconnected from the active duty world now, so I'm not exactly sure. But at one point, and you spoke to this earlier, Garret, as far as the promotion in our culture, our culture, just the American culture promotes it, but then in the military, it was weaved into the traditions and the rite of passages. And at one point, it was the MWR, which is Marine Welfare and Recreation, would have been completely in the red, completely bankrupt if it wasn't for alcohol and tobacco sales. And so now I don't know if that's going back in the late 90s, early 2000s, but I saw a distinctive difference where I think they started addressing it more aggressively and then addressing some of the cultural the cultural norms that contributed to it. I'm sure it's still there, but I think that I saw a difference at the time.
Yeah. Garret, what was your perspective on that?
Yeah, so very, very similar. I mean, there's certainly a lot of promotion and as Jen mentioned, certainly weaved into a lot of the culture in the military. And it started to shift a little bit before I got out. I got out in 2015. And I've seen even recently, I'm connected with a lot of mental health professionals in this area around Jacksonville and around Cherry Point. And I've seen and heard that they're making a much greater shift now and a much greater focus on prevention. So on some education, on some early intervention, and just helping individuals with their wellness so that, and I understand addiction or any, substance or behavior that somebody uses as a coping mechanism. That's not the issue. That's a symptom of an issue. So
Yeah.
I think they're becoming more wise to that, and they're trying to help individuals have a better, kind of a better foundation and
Mhm.
dealing with some of those underlying issues before they become much greater problems, and trying to educate and inform and weave into the culture some more healthy lifestyle choices.
Right, right. You can go back hundreds, maybe thousands of years where addiction was a problem, but they didn't know anything about it being an addiction or recovery. It was their way of just the culture, the coping with life. Um, the book I wrote about the Irish, I went back to County Mayo at 18th century, and drinking was just like, even when it got banned, like they tried to do in America, they had their stills, they were making their booze, you know. And then when I got up to the 20th century stuff and talked about taverns and bars and drinking in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is where Jen and I are from, you know, there was a big population of men that came from Ireland to Scranton, Pennsylvania. And they were miners. That was the only jobs open to them. And they worked all day, many, many hours. They got down at work, they were just full of dirt and soot down in their throat. And that was the start of what was called the neighborhood bar. So every corner pretty much had a neighborhood bar. And before you went home, you went there. And they would just, you know, get rid of some of that dirt in their throat and relax. And Scranton became a big drinking town. Am I right, Jen? Am I exaggerating? No. And I always tell people, you know, there's only two kinds of alcoholics in Scranton. The ones that are in the bar or the ones that are in the AA meetings. There's no middle. And so in the military, I think a big part of the social aspect in the military, and you see it in movies and everything, is they drank to celebrate. You know, you come back from a mission, whatever, you're going to celebrate. And for some
And
people, what, dear?
you're just celebrating and mourn, like mourn grief. It's just interweaved, you know. And you know, just I felt growing up in Scranton, I felt right at home in the barracks because we had beer gardens in the barracks. And back when I first came in, we actually had a vending machine in the barracks that you could get beer out of.
Yeah. And you had already been exposed to it because you lived in a building with a bar and your parents ran the bar.
Right.
So you
Yeah,
were
the culture was,
yeah.
culture was a little familiar.
Familiar.
Yeah.
Especially when the fights break out, right? So, all right. So is there anything, now I know, Garrett, that you said in one of your TED Talks how things need to change and improve a little bit more as far as this problem. Can you relay some of that to us? What you mean?
Certainly. So and that was really the biggest mission for this recent TEDx talk that I did, called The Unspoken Trauma That All Veterans Face. And I think what needs to change, or one little thing that could change that would be tremendously valuable, I think, is just helping prepare veterans for the understanding of the root of some of the challenges that they're going to face. So I remember, you know, we spend however many months, and they spend however many hundreds of thousands of dollars to train and prepare us in the beginning when they recruit us. But then on the way out the door, we get about a week or 40 hours of PowerPoint slides talking about how to update your resume, how to do an interview, and where to find a place to live. I think, and what I really try to capture in that message on the TED Talk, it was 10.5 minutes, but I tried to capture, I said, if I could have one message relayed to veterans to at least plant the seed. So if they start to feel these symptoms, or start to feel this way in the coming months or in the coming years, they can think back to something and have a little bit of clarity on it. And unfortunately, I've gotten a lot of feedback from veterans that say, you know, I've been struggling with something so long, and you're the first person to really kind of help me put a name to it and point a finger at where exactly that point was, that void I was feeling, or that source of that suffering. For anybody that's interested, I know you'll share the link in the show notes, but you can simply go to unspokentrauma.vet. And that's a beautiful way to watch the TEDx talk if you're interested, but also share it with anybody that you that you'd like, there's an opportunity there where you can sign up for a virtual watch party. So if you have a couple friends or colleagues that you'd like to watch the TEDx with, and I'll open a Zoom room, we can come together, we can watch it, and then have an opportunity to kind of share afterwards. I think
Yeah.
that's where a lot of the healing comes from, and a lot of the growth is from being able to share our reflections and our thoughts.
And Jen, you might share that with some of your clients.
Oh, I already have. I
See?
watched it first thing this morning when you sent it to me, and I've already sent it to some friends. It really is a powerful TED Talk. I mean, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's, excuse me, that's the whole thing with any illness. The first step is awareness, like admitting it is there, and then acceptance and then change. But the awareness of it is sometimes very difficult when you're right in the middle of it, right in the chaos. And, for my husband and I feel so blessed that I was led to sobriety and learning things about myself because he followed me. He stopped drinking for me. He will tell you that. And it took him a couple of years, right, Jen, to really believe that he had a problem. He thought he was doing it for me, But once he found out that he really took it in, there was a change in his personality that I noticed. And I don't ever remember him reading a book in our early days together. And now he reads all the time, Brene Brown, anything about, he loves Deepak Chopra. And he tries. And because he can't drive anymore, he has friends that take him to meetings and Zoom. What a blessing. They have AA meetings on Zoom. And he will go in his little office and go. And so I think life gives you there's no coincidences. It's like synchronicity, like life opens a door a little bit, but you got to push it farther open and walk through, right? So you guys, if you come out, especially you, Garret, and you're out there giving this message, you're helping a lot of people open that door and walk through. So I really appreciate both of you coming on today. And is there anything we've missed? Anything you'd like to add before we close?
I got two things. I'll say them real quickly. So one, for anybody who's interested, as I mentioned to you, Mimi, I offer a free gift to all of your listeners. If they are interested, they want to go to thewarriorreset.com, and I'll send you that link for the show notes. There you can find it's a very simple. It's really the best, most effective tools and processes that I found over the last couple of years to really help make a difference. So for anybody that feels like they're just not showing up the way that they want to, or there's something missing, or they are, they kind of want a quick little reset, emotional, mental, physiological reset. It's a very effective way to do it. And it's a 10-day challenge I'll provide. And it's 4 different exercises you can do or interventions that you can do each day. It takes less than 15 minutes a day, but you can experience that, and you'll experience a tremendous mental, emotional, physiological shift in your body, and a great reset. And the last thing I always like to mention is for any veterans or any listeners out there that are not living the life the way that you want to, or feel like you're a little bit disconnected from the version of yourself that you want to be, know first and foremost that you're completely lovable and acceptable just as you are. And you do have the capacity, and you do have the potential to make the changes in your life that will get you to that better place. And if you don't know that, if you can't connect with that love for yourself now, then know that we hold it for you, and that you can find it with the right support and the right steps forward. That's perfect, because the whole message of this podcast is to empower yourself and to love yourself. And thank you again. Thank you, Jennifer, for coming on, and keep doing your good work. And thank you, Garret. Maybe we'll get together again and do another aspect of growing and potential. How's that sound? And I know my listeners will love this one. All right, I'll put all your links on, and you have a great day. Everyone listening, you have a great day too, and take some of this in. Okay.